Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Things Pilates. I'm Darian Gold. Arms come down. Make sure that front leg is bent and reach up, 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 up. Good. And again. And exhale and deepen your exhale as the carriage comes in. Many of you practice and teach on the Gratz apparatus, but some of you may not have heard of David Rosencrans, the co-owner of Gratz Industries that manufactures the equipment. Though the Pilates world has no shortage of egos, David has quietly and diligently continued to do his part in keeping the classical Pilates flame alive. Born in Manhattan in 1955, David was an outstanding high school athlete, and his friends encouraged him to enroll in acting classes because of his good looks and strong physique. And he did. He studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. But David was also interested in traveling, and his youthful curiosity took him to Europe. Without any definite plans for the future, he landed in Sweden and stayed long enough to become proficient in the language and to learn about European arts and cultures. His wanderlust took him to other countries, such as India, Pakistan, and Morocco. And by photographing and documenting all of his travels abroad, David was developing his art and design talents. He returned to the States and took sculpture and photography classes at the Arts Students League and metalworking and stone carving at the School of Visual Arts. Finally, in 1985, David realized that he wanted to open his own studio and did so in Tribeca, New York City. Then, one day in 2005 on a construction job, David met Roberta Gratz, the wife of the late Donald Gratz and owner of Gratz Industries. David and Roberta struck up a conversation about his interest in design and in particular metal fabrication. It was during this conversation that Roberta told David about Joe Pilates and his inventions. Her enthusiasm piqued David's interest and curiosity. So when Roberta asked him to come work for her, he said yes. Just 1 year later in 2006, David became co-owner and managing partner of Gratz Industries. Zooming in to tell us more about what it's like to be at the helm of the most recognized classical Pilates equipment company in the world is David Rosencrans. Hi.
Hey, Darian. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Hello.
Hello there. David, what were your goals and your intention in opening your own design studio?
Well, I was coming from a sculpture background. I enjoyed making objects and bending zinc and copper and brass, making light fixtures for other architects and designers. And then I had the opportunity to start designing some restaurants in New York, where I would create the interiors and the fixtures and the bar and all the lighting, and it just grew into a small little one-man shop.
What was the name of your studio?
Well, it was just me. It was David Rosencrans Design, and when I say one man, I always had employees and assistants that helped me fabricate the work. And later on, when I got involved in bigger, more complex interiors projects, I would typically have interns from design school who I would hire, as well as, licensed architects who I needed, because when you build in New York, as in most places, you have to file electrical reflected ceiling drawings and HVAC and duct and all kinds of things. So I learned a lot about how interiors and buildings were actually made, and all the stuff you don't see behind the walls and above the ceiling.
Is there a restaurant now that has your name on it, has your talent?
There are maybe one or two restaurants in New York. Most of them have gone through a couple of renovations over the years. It's been 20 years since I was in that business. There's a thematic 1950s style diner called the Comfort Diner on West 46th Street in New York, and that still exists, and it's a real fun place.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then did your studio sort of go into the background after you met Roberta Gratz, or were you doing both at the same time?
I was doing both, but I had a studio in Tribeca in Lower Manhattan, and I was an apprentice to a stone carver, a master carver named Rene Lavaggi, who had been my teacher at the School of Visual Arts. And he was truly a mentor. And I had a small space in the loft. And, sadly, when he passed away and the dynamic in Tribeca changed, suddenly there was a lot of celebrities buying up lofts for living. They changed some of the zoning laws, so buildings that had been manufacturing and industrial zoned were changed to a more open usage. So I just got priced out of the studio. It just became too expensive. It was worth more to my landlord as an apartment than as a rough and tumble studio with welding and grinding and stone carving and all the other metalwork that I did.
It must have been fortuitous then when you met Roberta, the timing of it, right?
Yeah, it was a very interesting thing. After my studio closed, and after 9/11, there was so few new design projects. Everyone was obviously in shock, and so I realized that there were larger companies, contracting companies and architectural firms that had existing projects, and I started working for them as a site manager and foreman and construction manager, and it was on one of those projects that I met Roberta.
And she convinced you to come work for her.
Well, it didn't take much convincing. I knew I had heard of Gratz, which is what the company used to be called in the architectural and design community. It started in 1929, and there was a salesman named Tritel, and Frank Gratz, the patriarch of the company, was the engineer and metal genius. And there had been articles about Gratz in design magazines and in the New York Times, so I was really a fan of the company. So it didn't take much for me to accept the opportunity.
But then a year later, into working for Roberta and Gratz, you became co-owner, and I'd say you work really fast. You must have charmed the heck out of her. What happened?
Well, no, no. It was a mutual decision. I came in not knowing really what to expect. I had always had, as I referenced earlier, a small studio or atelier with 3 or 4 employees, and Gratz had 30 employees and did a lot of contract work, architectural, metal, furniture, sculpture, in addition to the Pilates manufacturing. And I came in initially with the thoughts of reinvigorating that architectural and design work because Donald Gratz had passed away in 2003. But, Roberta and I decided that I was a good fit, and the rest is history, as they say.
Give me a timeline in terms of Gratz being a metal fabrication manufacturer, and then how did the Pilates apparatus come into play?
Yeah, well, again, we were located in Manhattan, Gratz, at a time when there were manufacturing lofts right in the center of the city. They were, I believe, in the West 30s in Manhattan. And then similar to what has happened more recently with gentrification, and the rents became too high in Midtown Manhattan, and the factory moved to Long Island City, Queens, which is just across the 59th Street Bridge and a short subway ride away. And Frank Gratz, established the shop there. And he passed away, and both of his sons, Donald and Bill Gratz, both of whom had studied engineering and came on board and worked for the family. And in 1965, Donald Gratz married Roberta Brandis, became Roberta Brandis Gratz,
Yes.
who was a writer and journalist. She wrote for the New York Post and New York Magazine. And she remembers Donald coming home and being very excited. They had just gotten married, about Romana introducing him to Joe Pilates because they needed someone to make a series or a suite of apparatus for Henry Bendel's, the famous department store on 57th Street in Manhattan. And that's how the story started.
So that was the place, Bendel's, as the first studio that was equipped with Joe's apparatus?
Well, I don't know that. Joe had his studio on 8th Avenue with equipment that I believe him and his brother made. But and I don't know that it was the only studio, but I do know that Donald saw it as a great opportunity. We had previously made furniture for the American manufacturer Knoll, Knoll, which is a pretty famous company. And right about that time, they had opened a factory in Italy to make a lot of the famous Mies van der Rohe chairs and all the great stuff that Knoll produced. So Donald felt it was very auspicious because he saw the potential in the Pilates apparatus and thought maybe this will replace some of the furniture business that we're losing at this point.
Oh, that's interesting timing.
Yeah.
How did Romana come into the picture at that point?
I don't know. She was introduced to Donald in some context, and as Roberta always likes to recount, Donald never took a Pilates class, but he was, as all people who met Romana, he was completely enamored with her and just thought she was so great. And he was really fascinated by the equipment, the fact that there were gears and springs and moving parts. It was right in his wheelhouse. And, he took to it quite quickly. And, and he just, seized the opportunity, as they say.
He never tried a class with Romana?
He did not. At one point, he was installing a large fixture in one of the office buildings in New York and fell from a ladder. And Roberta had already been taking classes with Romana. She had been in a car accident and credits with Romana with really her being able to strengthen her spine and walk without pain. And when Donald fell off that ladder, he agreed to use the beanbag roll-up to strengthen his forearms. I guess he had broken his wrist, but that was the extent of his his use of the apparatus that he developed.
I assume he healed.
Yeah, he did. He did, I'm told.
When did you meet Romana?
Oh, I met Romana shortly after coming to Gratz in 2006 or 2007. I can't remember exactly. And I started taking classes. I was fascinated by the apparatus as well. I used to go to Drago's. I took the F train from Long Island City right to 57th. And, I knew about Romana. And then one day she was there and I was introduced to her. And it was great. She agreed to go out to lunch with me after my class. And I I said, "Where do you want to go?" And she said, "The Russian tea room, of
Of
course,"
course.
which was a very posh and
Yes.
wonderful place. And we shared, we shared some amazing food and champagne, and I got to listen to many stories. That first meeting was really wonderful.
This was Drago's gym, correct?
This was Drago's gym, yes, which at that point was in an office building on West 57th. I believe it's 250 West 57th, right off of 7th Avenue in New York. And there was still a gymnastic component at that point. I think Drago had retired already, if I'm not mistaken, but there were some Eastern European teachers whose name I can't remember now, and they had people on the rings and learning gymnastics sort of right on the side on some mats next to all the
with
Pilates
those big
apparatus.
Windows as they're swinging.
Yeah.
Now, Romana's daughter Shari and granddaughter Daria continue Romana's legacy. Do they also continue Romana's relationship with Gratz Industries?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're very close, and Shari is an unbelievable teacher. I've seen her teaching. I've been to workshops in The Hague and in Rome and in Nice and in California, and I've watched Shari teach, and I really think she's a really underrated first-generation teacher. She doesn't often get mentioned when people talk about the Pilates elders, but in fact, she grew up in Uncle Joe's studio, as she called it, and she's more shy and probably a lot more shy than her mom was. But yes, the answer is we've maintained a relationship, and we've shared meals all over the world, and I know her husband. And same with Daria. I've visited her many times in Florida, and we've had a lot of fun together, and I've most recently in Prague got to play with her little daughter for a couple of hours, and that was a lot of fun. So yeah, we're very close.
I remember back in the mid 90s or late 90s, Romana would tell us that monthly she would go to Gratz Industries Long Island, Queens factory, and she would make sure that nothing was being altered or changed. Does Shari do that?
No, that was, Romana worked so closely with Donald, and she did the quality control. What you're describing is she went out there to make sure that the eye hooks were in the right position and that the spring bar was mounted properly. And again, Donald was a great fabricator, but there were 30 craftsmen in his shop. So Romana really, kept in touch in that way and monitored the development and production because she had a vested interest in the equipment working impeccably. Shari did not come out to as I remember, but she certainly shared her thoughts with me whenever I saw her about the springs, about the handles, about everything, the upholstery. She was very much involved in, again, maintaining the quality. But I would come to her; she didn't come to me. And the other funny story about Romana is another day after our first meeting, I was taking my Friday afternoon class, and I was grunting through the exercises. I was like Monica Seles in a tennis match. I don't know if you remember her, but every time she hit the ball, she grunted. So I'm doing the footwork, and I'm doing the short spine, and there's like a soundtrack, and all of a sudden I become aware that the studio is deathly silent. And I look over, and Romana was staring at me with like one raised eyebrow, one eyebrow up and one down. And I realized at that moment that I had to be quiet. And even though I thought my grunting was a sign that I was working so hard, just that look made me completely quiet. And I never grunted again, Yeah. And she also had another very playful thing that she would do with me. When she met me, she would always walk up to me and pull my head out of my neck. She would take my head in her hands on either side of my sort of cheeks and raise my head, because I guess I had a postural issue and she was calling attention to that. And every time we would part, before we did that, she would ask me to take her hand and she would implore me, try to pull me, try to move me. And I would, she had a very strong grip and I would jokingly feign like, oh, I can't do it. And she would pull me forward and she would laugh and I would laugh. And then I'd give her a big hug. So I have some great memories of that. What a lovely woman. And
that's wonderful.
Yeah. It was sad that I met her at the end of her life and unfortunately had to witness her decline in cognitive abilities and so forth. But she was so beloved and she made the people around her feel so special. And I think that's an amazing quality that she had.
That's innate. It's very hard to teach.
Yeah, she was just so magnanimous and so talented. And yeah, she just, after meeting her and traveling all around the world, again, I went to Cynthia Lochard's studio in Australia and Marjorie Oren's studio in The Hague, and was with Philippe and all the top teachers in the organization, Juanita Lopez, and, all of their stories about her were just so compelling because each one felt so special and so close to Romana. And it was really moving to meet all these great teachers and people in the organization. And again, we're still in touch with all of them, and we work with all of them. We organize workshops and all kinds of things. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to both meet her and Shari and Daria and to continue the relationship.
Is that a difficult process, getting your apparatus to The Hague or to Australia?
Well, there's shipping companies. Things are shipped. They were shipped from New York. We're now in Philadelphia. But we spend a lot of time wrapping and packing the apparatus. We put it in boxes, and the logistics companies put it on the airplane or on the boat. And, we're able to send stuff all over the world. And we do, as I walk through the factory today, there were boxes going out to China and Korea and Portugal and Poland and Mexico City, Canada, and of course all over the United States. So we've got the logistics down at this point.
That's really good, because way back before you came on board, it was a little iffy.
Well, yeah, I understand that. And not everything works as swimmingly as I may be describing. Occasionally something gets sent to the wrong place or something is damaged, unfortunately, in shipping. And that creates a problem, when a customer has been waiting for their apparatus and it comes, and because it was mishandled in shipping, it gets damaged, and it's a process to file a claim and so forth. But fortunately, it's a very small percentage of our, of our sales.
You may be hearing the words self-care a lot lately. But what does self-care really mean? I thought I was caring for myself, eating super clean and healthy, getting enough sleep, or at least trying to, regular cardio exercise, and of course, maintaining my Pilates practice. But I don't think this is all that self-care means. Yes, we want to maintain a healthy lifestyle, to be sure. But recently, I had an acupuncture treatment, and while I was lying there with needles protruding from my feet, legs, arms, and ears, I had a revelation. Self-care includes quieting down the nervous system and making time to shield yourself from the outside world and its influences. Please find your own brand of self-care and make sure to include it in your daily activities. Now back to my interview with David Rosencrans.
David, tell us about your family, and is anyone in your family part of the business?
Yes. My wife, Michelle, joined the company in 2008, initially because our bookkeeper left, and she had a background in doing human resource and bookkeeping and management in the restaurant business in New York. So for the past, since 2008, 12 years, we've been a mom and pop business, literally. When I told someone that recently, they said, just like Joe and Clara. I said, oh, don't put me in that rarefied air. But we do work together every day. And I have two sons. They both grew up working summers, packing Pilates equipment. And in fact, my younger son, Max, works full time now. He's studying at the community college in Philadelphia. And he's studying music production and graphic arts, and he works every day from 7 to 3:30, assembling armchairs and wonder chairs and unloading trucks. So the answer is yes. Three of our family members work at Gratz, including me.
You must be at your shop 15, 16 hours a day.
Well, no, we take turns, and that's funny because we started a night shift recently after the COVID closure, where we were closed as mandated for several months. We had a backlog of orders that of course had to be shipped, and new orders coming in. So we're like ships passing in the night. I'm there during the day, and my wife comes at 5. We overlap for an hour. I'm there till 6, and then she stays till midnight right now. And we do spend a great deal of time, as any small business owner or Pilates studio owner knows. When it's your business, you just keep working. You work weekends, you work nights, and you do whatever it takes to keep it going.
Does Michelle and your son practice? Do they get on the apparatus?
Max has taken classes, and he's indicated a willingness to start again. So he has taken a few classes. Michelle took classes in New York years ago, but it didn't appeal to her. She just didn't love it, and she found it hard to get up and get over there. So, she's,
well, I mean, you have it right there. So that's not an excuse, David. Tell me.
No, it's not. But of course, for beginners like me, and I've been doing Pilates since 2006, I'm hard pressed to go over to a piece of apparatus and work out myself. I rely on the teacher, whether it's a private class or a group class, because, I guess I'm just maybe a little lazy and remembering how many springs go with each exercise. And I always feel like, I get so much when my teachers point out to me that, I'm crooked or...
you just like your butt kicked, I guess.
Yeah, I do. And there have been so many great teachers I've had the opportunity to train with all over the world. So even though I'm a beginner, I've really benefited from some really great instruction.
And people listening probably don't know that you have a black belt in Seido Karate.
Right. Yeah. In the, after being very athletic growing up and playing basketball and lacrosse in high school, my family moved out to Long Island, and I went to high school out there, and I was introduced to lacrosse, and it was a really great sport. I did injure my shoulder and my knee playing. So I'd always been athletic, and I had done yoga in the 70s. And then I was introduced to martial arts, to Seido Karate, and I had the distinct honor to train with a world master named Tadashi Nakamura, his title is Kaicho Nakamura, which is Master Nakamura. And I went with one of my best friends. We started together, and 10 years later, I became a black belt. After it took me quite a bit of time. There were people who started at the same time that did it much more quickly, but it it really took me a long time to go through the whole white, yellow, blue, green, brown, and black, syllabus, and to be able to pass my test. And it was very rigorous. It involved sparring with other students. But the most fascinating thing about Master Nakamura's Japanese culture was we also had Zen meditation classes on Friday after the karate class, and that was an amazing experience to me, in that we sat and meditated to shakuhachi flute music, and he came around and with a Japanese bamboo sword, and you sort of put your head to the side, and he would tap you on the shoulder blades, which was a traditional part of the ceremony. I even went, to a Zen retreat, and we did karate and meditation. So it really was a spiritual journey for me, as well as just a form of exercise.
Probably when you first tried Pilates, even if you just felt like a beginner, it must have had some similar actions in the body and sentiments.
Absolutely. I'll never forget, after my first and second class in the winter of 2006, standing on the subway platform, waiting for the F train to get back to the factory, and having this extreme sense of well-being from doing Pilates. My blood was flowing. My body felt fluid, and it exactly what you said. It really reminded me of that amazing feeling, I guess, when you're endorphins and when you're, using your concentration and your mind and body. So it was very similar to the feelings I got from doing martial arts, albeit I didn't have the black and blue marks and the bruises, from sparring. So it was great. It was such a great thing.
It'd be nice to perhaps combine the two, and maybe that could be your new practice for 2021.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've gotten back into yoga during the COVID. I hadn't really done it regularly in many years. And besides virtual Pilates classes, I also have been taking virtual, and now I'm back in a yoga studio. And it seems to be a really nice complement to Pilates, where where in Pilates, I feel like I'm trying to do so many things in terms of scooping, and in yoga, I'm just sort of letting my gravity and my weight and my breathing carry me through. So right. I think they're really great and synergistic. And I'm not the only one. Of course, many teachers also practice or teach yoga as well, and it's I think they're great in combination.
There are different ways into the body, for sure.
Exactly, and the body-mind connection is so important to doing either one of them and getting the most out of it. Really shutting down your dialogue and all your thoughts and feeling the work and listening to your teacher, and and bringing that awareness to your body is so special.
David, I just have one question about the Pilates system as a whole that Gratz manufactures. There are some other pieces of equipment that have come out in the last few years. One called the bench mat, and there's another type of pedipole that has an adjusting piece.
Yeah, I'm peripherally aware of those. I believe they're from Joe Pilates' drawings, and or maybe there were prototypes, and I am aware of those. But Gratz chose not to really compete with the people that were bringing those to the market, because we have our hands full with the Reformer, the Cadillac, the Guillotine, the Wonder Chair, the electric chair, the mini barrel, the spine corrector, the pedipole, and all the pieces we make. So,
Yes.
so yes, I am aware of them, but we haven't pursued development of new products.
Not the hand tensometer either, right?
No.
Okay.
No. It's not something we traditionally made. Yeah.
Now, there is some very exciting news coming out of Russia and South Korea for Gratz Industries. Will you tell us about it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I went to Russia with my wife, Michelle, in 2012 to meet with Olga Burkova, who's the Pilates director at the world-class fitness clubs, which are in Moscow and St. Petersburg and throughout Russia. And there had been a number of Pilates teachers that had gone to Russia, including Jay Grimes and Kathy Ross-Nash and others. And they started hosting the Romanas Pilates certification program in Russia. So, as I mentioned, I went there and participated in a fitness event and got to know many of the Russian teachers, and they became friends, and I see them all over the world and speak to them, and Pilates has really proliferated since 2018. Small sort of brick and mortar studios have opened as well. And, you know, the Russian people are really amazing and great from my perspective, politics aside. Just energetically, I felt a strong connection. I had been in Moscow in 1976 as a hippie traveler, flying from Uzbekistan on my way back to Sweden. So it was quite remarkable to see the change from Soviet Russia in 1976 to free market Russia in 2012. And there's a big market, and we're really proud. We sell a bunch of equipment to studios in Russia.
And English Korea is spoken there?
Pardon me?
English is spoken there?
Many of the people we worked with did speak English, but their instruction is both in English and Russian. It's just like every other place. You know, when you go down into the subway, people have iPhones on, and it's just like every place else. And I'm a sort of history buff, so it's really amazing to me to look at the architecture and the Tsarist era. There's a lot of opulent, really amazing buildings, and then there's a lot of what they call brutal architecture from the Stalin period, and then there's a lot of new modern glass and steel and all kinds of modern architecture. So I find it to be a really interesting country, and Moscow is a city I would love to go back to someday.
South Korea, what's happening there?
Wow. Well, South Korea is really a phenomenon in the Pilates world. I know that there are so many apprentices. Pilates was very popular, and it was mostly contemporary Pilates. And then a couple of years ago, I want to say 10 years ago, some classical teachers, including Jungi Wan, who's a friend and has lived in New Jersey for many years, started to teach classical Pilates in Korea. And it's really snowballed in a way that, you know, the United States, the most equipment we sell is in the United States, and EU would be second, you know, all the European countries. And Korea is actually third in terms of volume for the past couple of years. And that's been great because I've traveled there 3 times. My wife, Michelle, and my son, Max, have joined me on 2 of those trips. And we've gotten to visit studios and have amazing dinners with people that have become close friends. And we did a lot of sightseeing. And I've also traveled to Hong Kong and China, visiting studio owners and spending time with them. Like in any business, and in any art, and the personal connections and the people that you meet and become friends with really are what make it satisfying at some level.
Yes.
And again,
Yes.
Korea has such a rich history in terms of art and textiles and ceramics, and all of which is really fascinating to me. And it's also a very energized and Americanized, one might say, country in that many people speak English, and there's a great appreciation of American culture beyond Pilates, including baseball games, which I went to there, and basketball games, professional games, as a spectator, and
Same
of course
level
they have
of
it.
talent?
Well, in baseball, I think Japan, Korea are very close to the Major League Baseball, actually. I mean, some purists would scoff at that, but, there are many Korean players that play in the MLB, Major League Baseball, and each Korean team has 2 or 3 American players typically. I believe it's the same in Japan. And in addition to those sports, there's also a great tradition of steam and sauna and massage. So it's a great country. After you work out, there's usually a sauna and a hot tub and massage services available. So it's really great.
You get the whole thing.
Yeah. And I just find the Korean people very very affable and approachable, and I made a lot of friends both with Korean studio owners, and I have Korean American friends here in the United States. So it's really a phenomenon, and I know that when I speak to teacher training organizations like Romanis Pilates and my friend Alicia Ungaro and Dorte Vanderwall and Metropolitan Pilates in Seattle, they also have an influx of Korean apprentices that have come and, live in those cities. And so the whole industry is being re-energized, I believe, by the Korean presence.
Do you ever imagine Gratz Industries opening a second factory in South Korea?
I've always resisted, at the risk of sounding self-deprecating, it's hard enough to make this stuff in Philadelphia. What I would like to do is establish a distribution hub and ship over inventory equipment to be stored and sold in Korea without the long lead time and the shipping costs.
That's a good idea.
And I was working on that before COVID kicked in. And the same thing is on the board for Europe. We have so many customers, and we would love to be able to get them the equipment more quickly.
There's lots going on in England for sure.
Yeah, all over Europe. It's I had the pleasure of visiting Poland a few years ago on my way to Prague and Rome, where there were the Romanis conference in Prague, their annual symposium, and then there was a great event in Rome, and which Mijo and Moses Urbano and other great teachers participated in, Dorte Vanderwall. Yeah, I went to Poland and visited studios in Warsaw and Lublin, Poland, and that was really eye-opening as well. There's studios in Estonia and Croatia, and the whole world is really embracing contrology and the Pilates
Finally.
method. Yeah, well, it took good teachers establishing themselves and and spreading the word. So it's very exciting. And I would imagine for a teacher like yourself, it would create guest teaching opportunities.
For
of
sure.
course, now
Yes.
travel
Now,
is difficult, but so many teachers that I know have traveled to these countries, and as
Right.
guest teachers, and I've been at events in Istanbul and all over, and teachers usually are from America or Europe, and it's really, I use the word again, it's a phenomenon, really.
Well, let me ask you, are you ready for Gratz Industries after COVID subsides? Are you ready for even more business?
Well, yeah, sure. Whatever we can do, we are trying to gear up now because we have a very labor intensive process. Our frames, our aluminum frames, for instance, are welded. They're sort of a unibody construction, and we spend a great deal of time sandblasting them and hand finishing them. And so many of the parts are handmade. It's a very time consuming process and a very labor intensive process. So as I referenced earlier, we're trying to add a second shift now so that we can be more productive and responsive to orders and try to create a better fulfillment process, which is a good problem to have, quite frankly.
Just speaking about the reformer, how many hours does it take to build it, to fabricate it?
Well, we make them in batches of 10 or 15, and they go through all these different processes. So there's many hours. I don't have the metrics in front of me, but while all of that grinding and finishing of the metal is going on, there's a carriage being upholstered, there's straps being fabricated, there's handles being made. We make everything from scratch, in our factory. So it would be tough for me to give you an estimate, but it's suffice it to say that many hours go into each piece of apparatus.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you can tell because it lasts forever. Right?
Yeah, and in fact, the frames are guaranteed for life. Some of the consumable products wear out, the springs and the handles. Sometimes the straps stretch and need to be replaced, but there's a lot of apparatus that's out there that, is 20, 30 years old, and it still functions beautifully. And
yes, I can attest
the credit
to
that. The credit goes to Donald Gratz and all the amazing craftsmen that we've had both in New York and Philadelphia.
Since you do travel all over the globe, what do you envision for the future of classical Pilates?
There's been a pivot since COVID where many of the new orders and requests for quotes that we're sending out are from home users, people who I answer the phone quite a bit after COVID when the rest of our employees were working remotely, which was really a blessing in disguise because I got to talk to a lot of teachers all over the world and people that were students who are now buying equipment because they said they weren't comfortable going back to the studio that they used to go to, so that they're going to buy equipment and take virtual classes, or their teacher would visit them at their home. So that's one trend that right now is really phenomenal. So many people are setting up home studios. And in terms of, commercial studios, unfortunately, they were hurt because of the social distancing. Many studios that, had 10 reformers lined up now can't book as many clients, obviously. And not all the teachers I know were able to use that word again, pivot to virtual classes. Some teachers just weren't comfortable teaching that way. They were, hands-on, one-on-one teachers.
Right.
So we're really hoping that, obviously, beyond Pilates, we're hoping that the world can, if not overcome this pandemic, but return to some normalcy relative to people being at concerts, sporting events, Pilates studios, in group dynamical situations. But for the time being, there's a lot of home studios being ordered all over the world. And my only concern there is I hope that the practitioners that order the equipment
know what
work
they're doing
safely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you can injure yourself if you're not supervised or you. That's really what I see. And as I referenced earlier, the growing markets in Asia, Israel has quite a few Gratz studios now. We have we have a great brand ambassador, Miguel Silva in Portugal, and he's got great programs, and a lot of studios have opened thanks to him.
In Brazil.
Brazil is not a market that we could actually ever sell in. And the reason is the Brazilian government puts tremendous tariffs on products. They want to promote products that are made in Brazil. So if you wanted to buy a Gratz reformer and ship it to Brazil, it would cost you more than 2.5 times the price and involve a lot of paperwork. So Brazil and Argentina are huge markets, but there are copies of Gratz that companies make down there and sell in the local markets. And we do sell very small handful of equipment to some Brazilian people who insist on our products. But for the most part, there's, I can name 5 or 6 copies of Gratz that are made in Brazil and Argentina. And that's what the people use down there.
But at least overall, classical Pilates is really meeting this moment now.
Oh, yeah.
Because of Gratz.
And I don't mean to diminish how amazing Inelia Garcia and so many great teachers and certification programs exist in Brazil. And I have great respect for them. And I know a lot of the teachers and even the manufacturers, and we've shared meals, and I have complete respect. And Brazil is such an amazing athletic country. And I believe in Brazil, Pilates teacher has to have a degree in either physical therapy or sometimes of sports medicine. So they're very well trained and very well informed teachers as well.
Nice. But it's classical Pilates, right?
As far as I know, the people that I know, yeah, they've copied the equipment and they've watched the same videos and they come to the same conferences as everyone else. So yeah, it's classical Pilates. Yes. And Romana's Pilates does have a presence in Brazil. We have a friend in Porto Alegre who does have Gratz equipment. He's also a physical therapist. So yeah, there's a very strong classical Pilates movement in South America, Chile as well, Peru as well, and Chile has a lot of great studios and teachers in Santiago, and they have Gratz equipment. They're not in the Mercosur alliance. They're not allied in the same way as Brazil, so they don't tax the imports as heavily, and teachers are able to buy Gratz equipment.
David, what is your website?
Our website is www.pilates-gratz.com.
Wonderful. I know people are going to be going there because you have such a beautiful website now.
Oh, thank you.
Started out humbly, way before you, I think. It's come a long way. It's beautiful now, really.
Oh, yes. Thank you. One of the things I'd like to point out, Darian, is that we have a monthly newsletter as well. Anyone can sign up for. And unlike a lot of companies, we don't use that newsletter to promote equipment for sale. We believe in the Pilates community, and we have a commitment to supporting the community. So our newsletter and our website function. Our website obviously is transactional and you could buy the equipment, but we have human interest stories and we have interviews with great teachers, and we try to highlight in our social media studios all over the world because we believe in the community and we believe in supporting teachers, not just the celebrities and the famous teachers, but the smaller studios. And, in 2019, we started a scholarship program where we paid for primary education for a wonderfully talented young man in New York named Joshua Keefe, who's in the Equinox teacher training program, and another gentleman, an ex-military officer who's in the Romana program, tribute, to charities, and we've donated equipment to Wounded Warrior projects, teachers that are working with rehabilitation of armed service members. And we're very involved with the community, and we have great respect for our customers, and our website and our social media and our newsletter all reflect that.
Wonderful.
And we get to shine a light on so many great teachers. We're really blessed.
Fantastic. Thank you for all of this information and all of your knowledge and experience, David.
Oh, thank you, Darian, for having me. It's a pleasure, and I know that you've interviewed some really special and leaders in our industry, so I'm humbled and appreciative of the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you so much.
For those of you listening that do practice on Gratz Industries apparatus, what exercise and on which piece of equipment do you love to practice the most? Please share on the All Things Pilates with Darian Gold Facebook page. All Things Pilates is produced and hosted by me, Darian Gold. Podcast production is provided by Audio Ephemera.
I'm Andy, the audio engineer for All Things Pilates, and I'm also a student of Darian's. My Pilates practice has strengthened my core and, more importantly, given me a new awareness of my body and its abilities. Darian doesn't hold back, but it's fun, and I always leave my sessions feeling energized. And I'm not the only one.
I'm Beatrice from Germany. I have been using the Pilates apps by Darian Gold since 2012. Then I discovered she's offering online classes in summer 2020. I was so excited and a bit skeptical, but it turns out that she sees everything and gives very, very useful corrections. I think I've even improved and learned a lot since then. I can participate despite the time difference of 9 hours, and it's so much fun to know that you train together with many clients from all over the world that share the same motivation and ambition and spirit.
Visit DarianGold.com to view her online class schedule. Also, try one of her apps, available on the App Store or Google Play. And to keep up with Darian and all her new interviews, subscribe to this podcast.
Until next time, respect your apparatus.